O'clock by my phone, so I'm going to open up the meeting of our Economic Development and Neighborhood Business Development Committees, and we're going to discuss the Housing Trust Fund Corporation. And I'm joined by Councilor Monto, Councilor Caldwell, Councilor Paniagua, Councilor Allen, Councilor Green, and Councilor Schultz. And we have Mr. Collins and Michelle here from the NBD. So why don't you give us a little overlay as sort of a catch-up?
First committee meeting earlier this month. Looking particularly to talk about the establishment of the Syracuse Housing Trust Fund Corporation. So just for a quick recap, Housing Trust Fund is basically any fund that is dedicated exclusively towards housing needs. They're typically administered by local municipalities or local government entities, and they are designed in accordance with whatever that community's priorities are in regards to their housing. So the proposal that we put, that is coming before the council right now, is to establish the Syracuse Housing Trust Fund Corporation. All of the funding that the Trust Fund Corporation, kind of the core mission of what the organization would be, is to really serve as the fundraising and disseminating body specific for housing needs for the city of Syracuse. Distribution of the funds that are raised by the Housing Trust Fund Corporation are going to be prioritized to meet several key objectives, which are to remediate mounting disinvestment and deferred investment in the city's housing stock, to provide residents of the city of Syracuse with safe, secure, and affordable living conditions, to attract new residents to the city, to promote economic development and enhance the real property tax base in the city. And really what we're looking for the Housing Trust Fund to do is to kind of serve as the vehicle of making progress on the housing market gap and housing affordability gap needs that were identified as part of the housing market study, and then act as kind of the main vehicle of how we would be looking to make progress on the recommendations that are presented as a part of the housing strategy this upcoming April. Couple of the kind of key things that we wanted to highlight, and happy to speak to kind of any questions that councilors have either from the first committee meeting or for other things that have kind of come up. But if the council were to proceed with authorizing the incorporation of the Housing Trust Fund, kind of the next steps from that point, we're able to move forward with the filing with the Secretary of State with a passage of the ordinance by the council. We would then be looking kind of immediately starting as early as we can, ideally, if the council were to proceed with passing this at one of the next meetings here in December. Then throughout the month of January, we would work through the process of kind of joint appointments of the board of directors and then the resident advisory board members. So to recap what those are, what we have put forward would be one person would be the president of the Common Council. There would be another councilor or their delegate as a second board member. There would be jointly appointed by the Common Council president and the mayor, and then 2 mayoral appointments, so 2-2-5 makeup there. And then for the resident board, it would be a 5-5 split was what we had recommended. The kind of main requirements that would exist for all board members, whether the resident advisory board or the board of directors, all of those folks would need to be city residents. There's no other qualifications to be on the resident advisory board. The only other stipulations that we do have for people that would be appointed to the board of directors is that they need to have experience in either economic development, housing development, urban planning, finance, real estate, something of that nature that's kind of specific to the work.
That has that background on the board, but say they work for like a development company, would this exclude them from doing business now with the city or being able to access funds from the Housing Trust Fund?
But in certain circumstances, they may need to recuse themselves from votes. I think it would be kind of it depends. There are some regulations around, particularly if the Housing Trust Fund Board of Directors is going to be soliciting any sort or entering into any kind of agreement. Say we were to take a loan from a lender or something, once kind of a larger pool of seed capital has been developed. For those sorts of actions to be taken, there needs to be at least one independent board member So that follows under kind of all the stipulations of you can't have worked for the city or a related entity for a certain period of time.
Development regarding the 5 million, saying that it's a guarantee.
So we do have communication. We have communication saying that it's there for us. I can confirm exactly whether that came. The decision to run it through ESD was post budget, so I just need to take a look and see. So we have written communication with ESD specifically about the disbursement.
So we'd want to see something like an official letter saying the $5 million is guaranteed. And as far as, do you foresee the trust fund corporation owning land?
Exist in the community that are doing those sorts of things well. I think we would be, really the core focus of this is to serve as the coordinating body for fundraising. So there certainly is probably going to be an element of acquisition that is going to be important to implementing the recommendations of the housing strategy. And although it is an explicitly enumerated power that the Housing Trust Fund Corporation could have, so New York state law, local development corporations do have the ability to acquire property, to own property, to lease property. It is up to the board of directors who are appointed to make the determinations of exactly how the funding will be prioritized. So again, how we're thinking about this is that we want to prioritize the trust fund corporation acting as the fundraising body, and then the board members will be making the determinations around the most efficient way to be implementing that. So I would defer to corporation counsel on that.
So Councilor, a couple thoughts. One is we don't necessarily want to limit what the future holds for an organization like this once it's had a chance to impact.
I think because we have entities that we're aligned with that do a really good job here, home headquarters and the land bank. So, and I think, I like this concept, but I think we have to narrow the frame a little bit in order for me to be comfortable with it.
So totally understand that. To Deputy Commissioner's point, the idea, one of the powers that a trust fund allows you to do is to be able to do something.
But if the land bank exists, why would you even contemplate that?
Well, it's not that it would hold the property. It's that it would. But that becomes not an option if it can't even acquire it in the first place. So you're completely right. The idea isn't to become an organization that's going to buy and hold, but the idea that it would be excluded from even purchasing in the first place does limit its ability to have effectiveness. So I think that's the kind of thing that we want to work through. What's the right way to address the concern while also making sure that it's able to be effective in the first place? So it's the public authority, yeah.
So was that from you guys or was that from them? Okay, so what made them, where did they get that from? Do you know?
Yeah, so they.
Okay. Because that was alarming. When I read that this morning, I was like, wait, hold on.
Right, so glad you brought it. They have conflated the public developer. And that happened, but
Okay.
that's not, we are not talking about to become, what we are talking about
It's working.
the public development model. You know, that is not something that our market is set up to do right now. What we don't want to do is exclude ourselves from 20 years from now necessarily being able to do something when the market looks different. But yeah, that was not an accurate representation.
work a minute ago. So I have two questions. One is, I think you guys are amazing. I'm gonna tell you this, but I have questions about us as a municipality starting to do trust funds that were like, and you were saying that we have to basically solicited money to keep it going. Like, how are we gonna raise money? Like, how are we as a municipality now gonna start raising money to keep something going? And the second part is, do we have the whole framework from the government, what it looks like, so we can see what the application and process that you guys are doing, what it looks like what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do? Can we see that? Like, I would like to read it.
Objectives that money is spent must meet. So those were all the things that I just laid out before as far as kind of catching up on deferred investment within the city, ensuring safe, quality, affordable housing. It's a very broad scope of things, I think, kind of encompass the spectrum of things that we all know to be challenges that we have here in regards to our housing. The particular ways in which it can go about doing that are all clearly enumerated within the Articles of Incorporation that has been provided to the council. Happy to up that to anyone. Yep. So those determinations are all things that are up to the board of directors to decide. So any of the funding that they have, they are able to make the determinations of exactly what a qualified applicant could be who could access those funds. They can set the priorities around what exactly they can be used for. They could say, hey, we want to put this much towards the construction of new housing and this much towards rehabilitation for this particular population. It is very open and broad. So to your question, we can't provide that with you because those are all determinations that will be made by the board of directors, taking in kind of feedback again from the what is laid out within the housing strategy plan and the feedback that we get from the community, which a lot of that would be coming kind of from the folks that are appointed to the resident advisory board.
I just want to clarify, not once the board, I want to see the whole application, not what,
So
if it gets approved, I want to see what into for application, like what is already laid out, what we can do and what we can't. There's already parameters, right? But once, if it approved, you're gonna have a board of directors that's gonna narrow it down more. What is the parameters that they have already given you? I would love to see it and read it so we know what it looks like, right? Because each state and everyone's going to be different. Each city is going to be different how they develop it. But they gave you parameters already, right? I would like to see that.
So so Councilor,
Yeah.
when you speak of application, application to or from who?
Application process that you receive, right? With all the paperwork, right? That says what you can do, what the housing. I would love to see that and go over it because we're getting it based on what you're saying, but I would love to read it to see it so that we have a better understanding of what the application process is, and then go from there.
Okay, so we have two. I think I'm going to touch on two things that I think are getting to your question. One is we do have the draft articles of incorporation that we've shared, and absolutely happy to share it again. That outlines legally what basically the broad parameters of what that trust fund would be allowed to do. So we can certainly re-up those again. So yes, that is the draft articles of incorporation that we've worked with legal counsel to create. So you're talking about the $5 million?
Yes. What was the information that talks about before you guys wrote this up?
So this came out of the fact that looking at the housing market study, we knew that we needed, really going into the housing market study, we knew we needed to do this. So back, even before we did the housing market study, we worked with a grant through enterprise to be able to pull together a lot of people within the community, a lot of the experts within housing to look at what a housing trust fund could do and what it might look like for the city of Syracuse. And that's something we're very happy to share again as well.
The $5 million, in order for us to receive the $5 million from ESD, what are we required to do?
What does that
That's
look
what she's
like?
saying. She wants to see what they sent you. So they said, yeah, we'll give you the $5 million. These are the conditions. What did?
So that this was a set aside within our annual ask to the governor and our delegates. And so we had put together a paragraph saying we're looking for seed funding to create a housing trust fund. And they said yes. They haven't worked through that yet.
The Secretary of the Interior is who's going to govern this, right?
So that it would be, when you say this, you're talking about the money, you're talking
The
about
Housing
what?
Trust Fund.
So
The-
it's public authority law that governs the trust fund.
Okay,
As far as the $5 million, that would come through ESD, so that's part of what we're still negotiating with them. Yes.
We're talking, and, I've been involved a long time, and the worst thing you can do is create a public government. So I think we need a recurring, some of the stuff you guys, you people throw before us is sort of a yard sale of different things that you could grab. Different monies you can grab, like the sale of the Syracuse Developmental Center, which I didn't even know about, as far as how much money we're going to get for that. How much is it appraised for? I have no idea.
Strategy, some of the numbers that have been talked about kind of to catch up on deferred maintenance, we understand that we are going to need kind of a multifaceted stream of sources. So I think the strategy that we're kind of putting forward is that we first look to build as large of a seed fund as we can through one-time infusions. Also looking to see where can we get recurring revenue streams in reasonably kind of quick order. So as we've mentioned, there's likely going to be a recommendation that comes forward when the housing strategy is presented in April. There would be a recommendation that the council consider making an ongoing allocation to housing in some capacity over a period of time that could come to the Housing Trust Fund.
Is that what you're saying? And you're also saying anything that we sell, we would put in here?
Not necessarily anything, but I'm just giving those. Look, understanding realistic things that are in the pipeline from a city property disposition perspective, those are all very realistic examples of possibilities that we could use to pursue to contribute to creating that seed funding.
Getting federal money, and then also, or state money, and also I think we have to establish like a reoccurring, and I've mentioned before that we have CITA, and the last I looked at CITA, it was $3.8 million. Now, the last report filed, you might want to check into it, was 2021, at least on the website here. And so that's $3.8 million. I mean, if we could use CITA money, to me, would be an idea that would. But we got to check with UTEP of the CITA and all that too, to make sure that we're. Okay, we've had those conversations?
So the CITA board has not authorized it yet.
Is it going to be on their agenda?
Within our office. Definitive determination made yet to that effect, but those conversations have all been ongoing.
It would be a small amount of money, I believe, letting them ransom themselves out of like providing, affordable apartments. I'm more concerned, I think CITA is probably much more aligned to this type of thing than anything else.
So there's a few points that let's go back to the concern around competition for funds. Specifically, the trust fund is looking to be able to raise capital that goes alongside the capital that our development partners currently have access to. You all heard Charles Buki from CZB, our housing consultant, say that right now there is not state or federal money that meets the gaps that we have in the market. So what we're looking to do is be able to work with home headquarters, with Housing Visions, with the different agencies that do a great job to be able to make sure that the money that they're able to raise, or that the city itself currently, that most of it runs through NBD, if not all of it, is able to acquire, such as the $4 million, another now $4.5 million that we've worked with home headquarters to get through New York State to be able to rehab Syracuse Model Neighborhood Corporation properties. We're looking for the money, such as what we're getting through ESD, that is not currently available to any developers, so that we can go in and make good projects better, and projects that can't quite get off the ground. To your point around SARDA, yes, that's exactly why we've been having those conversations with them. Could totally agree. That's a great place to be. And the idea of the buy down that was mentioned in the paper today, the way the zoning law is set up is that if an agency or if a developer can prove that it is not economically viable to do the project, all but for needing a 25% reduction in their affordability requirements, that payment would go to the trust fund. To your point, that's not going to be much money. So no, we don't have any expectation that that's going to fund much of anything. It's just the way that the zoning law is written to be able to put it somewhere.
Of all this, so in prior conversations, I've heard from different people that we will hire staff for this, so to be able to manage the trust fund and all of what it entitles. So will that money come from those $5 million to start this staff off, or how is this going to work?
So the management of it, same way that we see SARDA and SEDCO managed right now, which is department staff being the administrative staff to it, and then the board's making the decisions. So in that vein, we'd be able to do that by hiring a few positions. Could we use a little bit of the $5 million? Possibly. Could we also be borrowing some of the capacity that exists within the department for a little bit of it? Yes, but we would be looking to hire 2 to 3 people, and most likely work that into a variety of different budgets.
Whenever they become available, to distribute to the different projects, however that works out, and then a plan to continue to raise funds so that we don't run out of money. So the money will go faster than our ability to raise the funds. At what point are we kind of bringing this together?
So the request before you right now, so if we look at it from a step-by-step process, is we're to decide on, hey, this is what we're comfortable with. And there is the ability to file articles of incorporation. From at that point, then we're able to go forward with a couple different things on parallel tracks. One is working with the council to make sure we've got all the board members appointed. Also doing the work that is ongoing with the housing strategy study. And then from there, building the bylaws to make sure that we're taking what we know from the market study, we're taking what we know from the strategy study, and what we know to be our existing infrastructure to be able to make sure that we've got the right plan. And it's with that we're able to, one, make the asks for the one-time hits, such as we'd like to do with the governor, we'd like to do with our federal officials, we'd like to do with Micron, but also, to Councilor Hogan's point, making sure that we're targeting exactly the right space to be making the strong pitch for the ongoing revenue as well. And that's something that I feel that we can make a really strong pitch once we've got everything, including what we've got from the housing strategy study in place. Yeah.
Trying to, make this work, but I'm be very transparent. I'm really struggling with this because we still don't. You're creating these bylaws, this board, but we still don't have the parameters of what the government's going to come back and say, right? So we know there's $5 million because you said you still don't know really what the government is going to say going to work. We're going to create all these parameters, this board, this team. We're going to ask for this, and they could come back and say, No, that is not what we want. We want A, B, and C. Am I correct?
Specifically for a flexible financing pool. So we made it very clear that the issue that we were looking to solve for was that the funding sources that were already available with the particular strings that are attached to them, those are not sufficient for the problem that we are trying to solve. So though it is possible that there may be some things that ESD may require, we have made it very clear that the purpose of the funding all along was for us to work around some of those things and that it be a flexible financing pool. That all being said, the $5 million is one aspect of the seed funding. As we've talked about, there's several other sources of seed funding that we're looking to try to see what we could kind of layer and leverage across other sources. Several of those other things that I mentioned in terms of kind of proceeds from real estate sales, any SITA payments that could be contributed, those are all things that we would have the ability to control wholly locally. And make those determinations and ensure that there are no strings at all attached to those funds other than that they're going into the Housing Trust Fund. So I think that's kind of how we're thinking about it right now, that we understand that making sure that we are having flexible financing has to be a core priority of all of the fundraising that the organization is doing.
Something is not working, we can definitely go back, revisit, and make the adaptable change.
We can't go back and do anything. If I'm wrong. Process this part, we're still creating something that we still don't have the actual rules and parameters yet, right?
So we do have the broad outline.
Of that we created.
No, as Michelle was talking about, that New York State has said that they will honor our request for flexible funding, and this is the $5 million. So we do have that, and like I said, I'm very happy to share the limited computation. Yeah. Well, we know that generally they're looking for I think it's which is the cart and which is the horse. They are looking to us for us to tell them what the specifics are related to this program. That's been our conversations with ESD to this point. So, well, they've promised $5 million based off of this, but they won't give it to us until we create the Housing Trust Fund. No. So but this is, I think, another example of their willingness to be flexible around this is when you look at the fact that we also. This was also part of the ask where we received $10 million to be able to make unrestricted housing units within the new 15th Ward development, because that's a development where we know if we create housing that is above and beyond the replacement housing that's already going to be part of that project for everybody that lives there now, it's going to be really desirable housing based on location and quality. And so they gave us $10 million to be able to use specifically to that. Again, not knowing exactly what the ratio was going to be, how much of it was going to get how many units. They're like, we buy your vision, and we're going to support it.
So we had to give it. It couldn't be like Housing Vision, Home Headquarters. They couldn't apply for it and let them run it.
Well, no,
Why did we?
Well, so that doesn't. That would be project specific. We are trying to address this.
Sorry, Mike, maybe I'll repeat. They couldn't apply for it in the same capacity because that's what they do and say they're working on the systems with us?
To Empire State Development, is that what you're asking?
Yes. Why are we going with, you know what I mean, like our budget? Like, I'm just looking at long term. Like, there's people that are already, that's all they do is housing, right? They work on it. Why did we step in and say, well, we're going to create this trust fund and we're going to be the one to do it? Well,
yeah, so it's a great question. So the difference being, we're in it on the money side, and we are in it on the planning side, which is why we've got Deputy Commissioner Owen Kearney, who's his job is planning and sustainability. Where do we do this type of work? Kimon Jordan oversees an entire team of housing and neighborhood planning. This is specifically within our wheelhouse. SIDA does this. SEDCO does the lending that's related to a variety of different businesses that can exist within the commercial spaces, and has also done some lending around the projects. That's not the type of thing that Housing Visions does. Home Headquarters absolutely does a lot of money-related stuff. This is a little bit different. Our experience with SIDA, the biggest project that SIDA has induced is a $100 million housing project. That's they've just started work on clearing the site on East Genesee Street. So this is completely within the wheelhouse of the expertise that exists within neighborhood and business development. So that's why we were the right ones to go make this ask.
A time coming where you're pushing for that money to go to the trust instead of the land bank?
Land bank to be healthy.
I know we've talked about funding the Housing Trust Fund Corporation regarding the ability to bond. The land bank can bond with property. If they own property, they can bond, for development. So, I mean, that's one of those duplications that maybe we don't take advantage of. And I think we have to be totally transparent. And, maybe you can talk a little bit about what type of projects we would this would be gap financing in essence. I mean, we wouldn't fund a whole project with obviously.
And I think to what Councilor Hogan just said, the article this morning talks about, becoming a landlord. Is that
No, that is not at all the plan. So I think that there was a lot of conflation of things that in ways that were not representative of kind of how we have talked about this and what we would be looking to do. So again, it's correct. Yes. So a bank that funds only things related to housing.
We all know LIHTC, there's LIHTC funding out there, low-income tax credit funding. We know that. But a lot of the folks I talk to who want to have AMIs of 80 to 120%, they don't qualify a lot of times for that. So we're talking about, people that have to go before banks and everything else and getting 10%, interest. Maybe Councilor Green can pipe in on this a little bit. And then needing that extra funding, along with pilot benefits and all that stuff that SIDA would give them.
There's a lot of places where this would kind of fit in. So it could fit in for a LIHTC project to try to do things that we know align with the needs that we have in affordable housing. So for example, correct, like a mixed project, or another example would be an LIHTC project increasing the number of larger bedroom units, so 3 and 4 bedroom units. We know there's a huge need for family housing. A lot of the LIHTC projects that are coming before us are often for studios, 1s and 2s. Not that we don't need those, but we also know that 3s and 4s are few and far between. So we could help increase things on that side. We could also increase affordability bands. So that you could kind of diversify that AMI mix. I think we would also be looking, we've talked quite a bit through the context of the housing study and the strategy. We know that owner-occupied housing and local landlord-owned property is also a very important component of this. And so a lot of what the strategy is talking about in terms of kind of the outcomes that we need to be achieving is really focusing on block by block development from end to end. We have done a much better job in recent years of doing block by block development based on what's allowed with our existing funding streams. So where we've been able. Exactly, yep. In conjunction with all of our community partners, we don't see any of that changing as with how the Housing Trust Fund would operate. But we know that on any given block, there's currently owner-occupied properties where owners may be above kind of some of that traditional 80% AMI cutoff, that some of those properties may have deferred maintenance that we want to figure out how we can help catch up on as a piece of that block-by-block development. We know that there's likely local rental property owners on some of those blocks. Those same properties also have deferred maintenance needs. If you happen to be a landlord who Say you have exhausted all the funding opportunities that might currently be available in terms of the lead program, for example. The HUD lead program only allows you to apply for 3 units within a certain time period. But if you own more property than that, you still want to look to make upgrades to your house. If that's a block that we're in some of those kind of targeted investment areas, we could design, the Housing Trust Fund Board could opt to design a program specific to some of those needs. That could take the form of kind of grants. It could take the form of low interest loans. We could also look, the Housing Trust Fund could look to take that funding and disseminate it to any of our current partner agencies to be doing some of that work. So in the places where... Right, so that's why I want to be very clear that the board can opt to take the funding and subcontract it out to another agency to do that work. It is very important to us that we are not duplicating services.
The funding you're getting, anyways, correct? No. Well, where are you going to come up with the other money?
Well, so, Councilor, I think that's part of what we. The idea right now is to go after the money that these agencies cannot and or just haven't been able to acquire. We've heard from Kerry Quaglia, and I believe you've heard from Kerry Quaglia. He would like to be able to have home headquarters apply for the money that the Housing Trust Fund has. We're not looking to be competing with any of our current agencies that are doing good work for the money that is already out there, because that's the money that is already out there. We're looking to make sure we're able to find secondary revenue sources that address, because right now, every bit of money that's out there is for income restricted housing. And it's generally only available on projects that pencil out in areas that already have an overabundance of income restricted housing. So a housing trust fund, as we work through being able to have the right capital, can work with acquiring the property that they turn right over to home headquarters in an area where that project now is in a more desirable neighborhood from an income level, to be able to make sure that that project is able. I mean, you take a look at the fact that it took, I believe, 9 years to be able to get the project at the corner of Ontario and Otisco over the line because of funding. 9 years for 9 houses is too long. And that doesn't have anything to do with, I mean, that's the premier developer in the nation doing it and still struggling with it. That's why we need this type of funding that complements what they do.
Here in New York that has made this work? Or is this going to be the first one in New York State?
New York State that we've looked at, they are all kind of all over the map in terms of the current amount of fundraising that they've raised. I think we're with this $5 million commitment, if the councilor were to approve this item, we would be one of the largest that's been approved thus far outside of New York City. There's the Battery Park Housing Corporation is one that exists in a New York City market that is very not at all comparable to here. There is also another one that I want to say somewhere in the Hudson Valley area that is a pretty significant private public partnership that would be, I guess the closest comparison that we might have here locally is a very, very amped up version of the University Neighborhood Services Agreement that is specific to housing. Again, that is not exactly what we are looking to do here. We need to have a broader scope outside of just housing that might be specific to that one particular neighborhood. So there are some examples, but largely I think it's something that we would be, I think by moving forward with this, kind of leading some of the existing work in the state. Housing market than what we're working with here right now in Syracuse. Not that our housing market isn't might not look differently in 20 years, and so again, that's why I think that the what's really important with kind of the way that this is structured is that we are allowing ourselves as much flexibility as possible to be adaptive to the problem over time. So as we make progress, again, kind of going back to what was very clearly laid out in the housing study, any progress that you make on one side of that market gap or that affordability gap, as you make progress on one end, you risk throwing the other one out of balance. And so we want to make sure that that is not happening, which is why we need this to be set up in the way that we have, that we're proposing, that allows it that flexibility, and it allows the board members the flexibility over time to adapt that strategy so that it is well matched to kind of the conditions that we're seeing in the community.
So so say this goes through, right? How fast would you need to hire? Do we need another lawyer on board? Like, what is the budget looking like that's going to come out of the city's budget for this project? Because you're saying that you would have to hire like 3 people, and then you would need another lawyer, right?
The city has a bond counsel that it works with. That would be a question kind of for corporation counsel. It is something that to some degree up to a certain number of hours is already kind of in the city budget. So that's who we've been working with up to this point. The same Gene Everett, the bond counsel for the city, who currently does everything for CITA, has also been doing all of the work for this project. Within kind of existing neighborhood development staff, I think up to a certain point, particularly at least through the end of this fiscal year, I think the needs that we have could be covered with existing staff. I think once the board of directors would get to the point where, and so at the end of April is when we expect the housing strategy to be presented to the mayor and to the council for their consideration. Once that is adopted and the Housing Trust Fund Board has the time to kind of make considerations around particular programming that it wants to prioritize, which we expect would likely be in the summer. Depending on exactly what that programming looks like, we may wish to add in a little bit of additional capacity. I think one area where we would probably need to add, we could look to kind of phase it a little bit over time. I think one particular skill set that we might need more quickly could be on the underwriting side. But even there, we do have existing capacity through some of our other municipal corporations, SEDCO being one, where we have enough skill set to get us through for a little while. Within our office. So I don't want to say that as kind of a blanket statement. I think we have a cushion to go for a little while. It's not like you pass this in a couple weeks and then that day we're saying we need new positions. Staffing and being able to devote kind of FTE support just to Housing Trust Fund has been for every agency that we've talked to. We talked to all 7 of the ones in New York State and many other ones outside of New York State that are doing this work, and they all say that really intentional staffing that is dedicated just to the work of the Housing Trust Fund is really important just for kind of sustained ability to implement. So yeah, 2 to 3 has been what has been kind of consistently recommended, but
to look at that too, like if we're going to hire, what does that look like? What does the budget look like?
So that's what we're saying. So 2 to 3 is what we anticipate kind of in the future. And so, the cost of 2 to 3 FTEs is, you could look at kind of for a budget comparison, you could look to all of those positions that we would likely be needing to add exist in some way in neighborhood and business development. So it's not like we don't have a proxy to be able to plan for exactly kind of like what that might look like. So, and again, we have the ability kind of to look within as we're bringing funding streams, very similar to how SEDCO and CITA are currently structured right now, that those funding streams that are coming in, that cost, that admin could be covered through those sources.
Like legal fees, things like that. So is that something we would probably look at as kind of passing along those administrative fees that, like initially, to your point, I think we will need to hire people and there'll be budget for that. But at least that administrative component should be covered. This is just the way a bank does it that way. And then just to kind of go back to, first of all, great questions by everyone, and especially Councilor Caldwell. I think getting these details right is really important as we move forward to it. But I do think the analogy of comparing this to SEDCO is really instructive. I used to be on the board. I know Councilor Paniagua is now, and SEDCO duplicates business lending. There's plenty of banks and credit unions that do business lending, but what SEDCO is unique is projects that a traditional bank wouldn't take because they're too risky. SEDCO is able to say, this is great for the city of Syracuse, so we're going to take this risk because the benefits outweigh the cost to us. in the same way that I think this could do this, where there's housing projects that, home headquarters, which has a board, and Carrie has fiduciary responsibility not to lose money on a project that maybe doesn't work. This agency can say, like, this is great for this neighborhood, we're going to do it and take that risk. So I think we got to make sure all the details get right. But to me, is there a need for this? I would say absolutely.
At home headquarter, would they go to Housing Vision? Would they go to, or is this more granular than those organizations?
What's known as the capital stack to a project. Right now, we get a lot of projects that come to us either for funding through a home, or they want a letter of support to the for their LIHTC application, for the low income housing tax credit application, or money that we're able to get through AHC again for affordable housing. This becomes when you look at those projects, they've always got a variety of different revenue stream or capital streams to be able to support the project to begin with, including, to Councilor's point, some bank financing. This adds more flexible funding to a project. So the project can go from something that, hey, we developer A, we get what you're talking about, but that project is better fit over here. So there's acquisition costs we need to deal with. That is a better project if it has a diversified income band within it, and New York State won't fund it that way. We're able to put the money in that way. Somebody wants to do a market rate project in an area that otherwise has only seen affordable housing. If we're able to recognize that the changes that are happening because of what we know from a business growth standpoint and otherwise, that is going to be a need in that neighborhood, then we're able to do that as well, where otherwise the cash flow of the project wouldn't work. So the idea is this becomes the money, like SEDCO, that will be able to make a project a really strong project that otherwise, with current money that's available right now, it could not be as strong.
We're creating this and not keep the SEDCO.
In particular. So I don't even think that for SEDCO that housing is within their what they're allowed to do based on their articles of incorporation at all. SITA has a kind of asterisk around ways in which they're allowed to induce projects that have a housing component. There is nothing within what SITA is allowed to do that allows it to operate for the benefit of owner-occupied properties, which again, as we've talked about, kind of understanding what's been outlined within the housing strategy, that has to be, it's kind of one of the non-negotiable things that we need to make sure that we have the ability to address in some way.
Councilor Majok, I'm glad we're always, you're the last but the best, I'll tell you, Councilor
Majok. Higher up in terms of governor office, right? And it seems like, from what Councilor Cardwell was asking, she was asking of something like as if, quote unquote, RFP from the government sending it out. And it seemed like there is nothing like that.
So this came menu of asks that we have to the governor's office and all of our elected officials. So this is specific to the city of Syracuse, much in the same way that we'll ask for legislation that'll make it easier for us to roll fees and fines under property taxes. It was on that same list. And
currently have them or are setting them up, and how much money are in each of their pots currently. So we're special, but we're not that special.
Over some of the information you said, if we're looking at. Gotta come up with a budget, right? Because you're gonna need somebody to continue to write grants. For money, right? That's one separate job, just alone right there. Like, I can't imagine her doing anything else when it comes to that. So then, and then just keeping this going. So you're talking about, you know, another couple $100,000 at least a year to keep housing trust fund going.
What we know right now is that, and we've got an opportunity in front of us like we've never had before. What we don't have are the tools to match the two up very well. The tools don't exist. So that's why we're asking that we do make this big leap and create a toolbox that allows us to do it. Absolutely, we need to come up with a working budget and all of those things. So if we look at the process, the idea being articles of incorporation would be filed if the council were to authorize this. From there, there's the appointment of the board members, board directors, I should say, working through taking the recommendations from the housing study, taking recommendations from what we all know, and creating the bylaws, and then also creating the budget while making sure that we now have a dedicated structure to go out and make these asks for the recurring funds and for the one-time funds.
Time, what the expectation was before we went to anybody, because you got to think ahead of what we're going to need, right? So to come up with this team after we pass it and then say, oh yeah, we need this. But to me, and I'm not trying to shoot shots at anybody, I just think that we have to look at it because our budget, ARPA money is going to be gone. Housing is very important, right? People need to be safe. We need to be able to support people, but we also need to financially be able to. We hire a lot of people do this, right? And what is that going to look like, and how we're going to stay? And then my last question is, through the community, through like home headquarters, housing vision, all of them, you already had a talk with them, and they're okay with this.
Been supportive. Land Bank is very supportive of this. We've heard that directly from Caitlin. Kerry Quaglia said he would like to be able to apply. So yeah, I mean, generally speaking, this would create access to capital that doesn't exist right now, and we haven't met a developer yet that doesn't want more access to capital.
I think,
Yes.
so I think, and so again, that needs to be kind of a core priority for the board of directors. So, and kind of going back to the appointments of the,
Like to Councilor Caldwell's point, I think we all know about the problem we're going to have housing. It's only going to get worse as Micron starts building and all that. I think we want to produce a city that has a significant tax base. You know, more houses, more taxes, sales tax, and a property tax. I mean, years ago, we had 230,000 people in this town. And we can repopulate a lot of these neighborhoods. But I think we have to be I know this has to be flexible and nimble. I'm okay with that, the housing corporation. But I think we have to have a narrow frame as far as where we go and get revenue, and we have to have a recurring revenue.
So we're really.
We're very lucky in this city to have home headquarters and obviously the land bank. I mean, we're one of the first. This land bank gets awards all the time, nationwide awards. But I think we don't want to be in competition as far as funding goes.
Yeah, we're very happy to work through that.
Does this?
We got to, because those are people that help us take care of our community.
well, and I think there's very. city because those organizations were better positioned to do it more efficiently than we currently were. So there is no way in which we are trying to compete. This is only additive.
So have you talked to them? That was my only question.
Yes, we have talked to them.
You talked to all of the and said, listen, we can't be a team.
Yes,
We don't want to.
Yes.
yes.
And they were all okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
and mostly participated in the,
Are still participating within the course of the ongoing housing strategy work.
and our work 2 years ago around the idea of is a housing trust fund something that we should consider for the city of Syracuse?
For me, right? You are saying that by doing this, you are going to apply for money that none of these organizations are able to apply for. So that in itself eliminate competition. There's no competition there. No, he did say it. He said it. Right. Right. I think it goes back to it kind of ease up the nervousness a little bit to be very specific that any money that home headquarter is and Housing Vision are eligible to apply for, we will stay away from that. I think that need to be explicit to kind of calm that a little bit.
You're planning, correct? Well, I'm not owner occupied. I'm talking about like an AMI, like I envision like buildings that are like the buildings we have downtown too. You're going to finance them too, correct?
So the part of what comes out of the strategy work. Appreciate your participation with that, is trying to make sure that we are focused on the tools that are going to be most effective for us in addressing the housing needs that we have. And so the idea is it is the type of stuff that either these agencies are not doing or that they would like some flexibility in how they do it. That's absolutely a component of this, is that not every housing project has to have income restrictions. Because we already have partners that make that consistent, that we know are also limited in narrow scope because of what the rules are with it.
If you can get that letter, regarding that, and then we'll probably caucus at some point and talk about this. Okay. Are you finished, Councilor Majok? Okay. I never want to call any meeting that you haven't finished all your questions, Councilor Majok. Okay, I'd like to ask a motion to adjourn?
Thank you.
Okay.
It does look beautiful.
One of my babies. One of the kids. I got all the kids.